Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome back to another episode of Found Footage Fridays with my co-host, Tom Reimer.
Hello. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah.
I never know what to say. You have to give me a line, something to say for the opening.
Whisper it to you. I think you do good. I like your little goodbyes and stuff at the end. I think it's perfect. I liked your "that's me" thing the last time. Oh, yes. So Tom and I are back with another episode of Found Footage Fridays with a pretty interesting film of choice for this one, I think. It's going to have a lot of conversations around it being on the show, I think. But we are going to be talking about Skinamarink. Which was in theaters for a short period of time. It is now streaming on Shudder. So normal stuff. 5.1 out of 10 on IMDb, 41% user reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, 3.1 out of 5 on Shudder, and 59% on Google. This is like middle ground pretty much on every review thing. And all it really says is two children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing and all the windows and doors in their home have vanished.
It took me a while to figure out that is what had happened, that the windows and doors were not there. I didn't pick up on that immediately. But
the only reason I knew about it immediately is because I watched the trailer for it.
Okay.
Because I don't know that they fully address it until later.
So I went in completely blind. I think I knew nothing about this at all. Yeah. Other than that, everyone is talking about it. So
yes, everyone is talking about this, and this does seem to be a pretty divisive film. I feel like I'm seeing just as much I didn't like it as I loved it. So what's important that I wanted to note is that the budget, they made this movie with $15,000.
Wow.
It made over $2 million in the box office.
That's that kind of thing right now that's happening in indie horror, whether it's indie horror movies, indie horror books. It's really exciting. And I think you saw something similar with Terrifier 2, although I'm sure the budget for that was significantly larger, but same idea.
But it's still an indie film, though. Yeah.
That explodes, so it's really kind of cool to see that sort of thing happening right now.
I agree. I love it because this is for me going the indie route, and that's with that includes books. I feel like that's where you're going to find these unique stories, these not overly reused ideas, these reboots, these adaptations. You're getting things that are outside the box.
Yes.
And sometimes that's not a good thing, but sometimes it is.
And that's one thing, that's the first thing you can say. The easiest thing you can say about this movie is that it is 100% original and definitely outside the box. This is not, you can accuse us of a lot of things, this movie, of not being this or being that, but it is certainly not tired. It is certainly not something that has been done. So
completely agree. So we want to do ratings.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so do we want to talk about maybe we'll save the is it or isn't it question for after ratings? Okay. All right.
Yeah. Go ahead and give our ratings first. Okay.
Sure. Do you want me to go first this time?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, probably, because I think I know how this is going to go. So you go first.
So this is tough for me, because I didn't really because I didn't know what to expect at all going into this movie, but I knew that, as I said, everybody was talking about it, and I think sometimes when that happens, and then you go into a movie, you have your expectations are probably wildly unfair.
True.
And I admit I was engaged by this movie, but I didn't understand a lot of it at first, and I think there was too much that I was asking about at the end.
Okay.
It was also, as a parent, uh, it was hard to watch this movie
Yep.
for a lot of reasons, which isn't necessarily a reason I should give this a lower rating. All I can do is rate it on how I
Yeah.
felt about it.
Yeah.
And so I can give this movie, and I'm going to give it extra points for originality
Yeah. Sure.
and being different.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that, I'm going to give this a 4.5 capes out of 10.
Okay. 4.5 out of.
Four and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's lower than I thought you were going to say, but
Yeah.
that's still pretty close to middle ground, which is
Yeah.
where this is falling for a lot of people. I think
Yeah.
for similar things, there's things that people are walking away from this and they're really appreciating about it, even if as a horror movie it missed the mark for them. Like it's interesting to hear people, because a lot of times we always talk about, oh, we love this movie or we hate this movie, but to hear so many people walking away not liking the film but appreciating it, that's not always the case, or at least being able to say some of the things like what you said about it being unique and that kind of stuff. So
I mean, I watch a lot of horror,
yeah, sure.
obviously.
Yeah.
You don't say. Here we are on the show. And I like getting scared. There are plenty of moments where I felt uncomfortable watching movies. But similar to how I really didn't like Hereditary for certain reasons, I just didn't. I really was like bothered almost by certain things in it. There were things in this movie that I was just sort of. It's not nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just like as far as like content and something that I choose to enjoy and watch.
Sure.
I'm upset by stuff in this movie. So that's just me.
Yeah. So I went into this only seeing the trailer, which I think, because of the way this is filmed, I don't even really know that there's that much to spoil with a trailer specifically, because there's not a lot to give away. You have to pay attention. Some stuff is very much left up to the viewer to interpret, which we've discussed before isn't always a good thing, because sometimes that leaves it too open and then we don't know what the hell we're watching. So, and I'm going to dive pretty deep into my personal life when we talk about like why I'm giving this rating, once we get into the meat of it. But this was like one of the most effective films for me personally that I've seen in a really long time. I was pretty uncomfortable the entire film, with the exception of maybe the first introductory before the parent goes missing. But after that, I was unsettled until it was over. And in a way of like it just got, I said this on a comment on someone else's review of this, that this got into my skin. Like there was just,
it got into my skin too.
It got into my skin and it settled there and it didn't go away for like a little while after I watched it. But so my rating for Skinamarink, out of 10 tapes is an 8.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think it had an effect on both of us. In a way, a similar effect, but you liked that effect more than I did. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
I certainly search out horror movies to be scared by them and to be unsettled by them. The way this unsettled me, and I know you're a parent too, but but for whatever reason, the voices, their voices, even like it just like burrowed into me, and so it was like hard to just sit and absorb the movie because I was that uncomfortable. And I guess maybe that is exactly what they were going for. And so maybe you would say I shouldn't give it as low a rating as I did, but not you, but people might say that.
But we always talk about like we all have different boxes that we want checked, you know. And this is one of those things where I think this is a heavy movie. I think the symbolism for what I think personally this film is about is very heavy, and it's hard as a parent, as someone who has a rough history with one of her parents. Like
Yeah.
this film has a lot to say,
Yeah.
but that's not going to be I don't want to say entertaining because I hate the way that sounds, but that's not going to check boxes of a fulfillment for everybody, because it's just the same thing with anything else. It's the exact same way as me sitting here and saying, I don't really like horror comedies. They don't check boxes for me
Yep.
because I don't want
Same.
to laugh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's the same thing. This is unsettling in such a way that it's not going to be a good experience, I guess, for everyone. And
Right.
I think, but I kind of still find that to be a compliment, if you ask me. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yep.
so yeah,
Absolutely. But I can totally see why some people love this movie
yeah,
and
yeah.
some people are just not sure about it, which is sort of where I am. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I see all sides of it because I've seen so many people talking about this film. I've watched multiple reviews, and it's interesting the way that it has affected so many different people. Because the other thing, and we talked about this a little bit before we started actually recording, but the other thing that's really fascinating about this is, like, it got a theater release, but there was no
Yeah.
marketing for this film, so it
No.
made like $2 million in the theater based on essentially word of mouth and social media.
Yeah.
Like, and
Th-
that's
th-
like,
It is such an interesting movie to have even had a theatrical release. Like, and I was sitting watching. I wonder
I
how it would have been to see this in theater. I wonder if I would have had a different experience
think it would have been
watching it on.
worse.
Maybe, yeah,
I
maybe.
think it would have felt even heavier than it already did, because it's different when you have control over the,
Your environment, yeah.
yeah, like
You could turn
completely
on a
different.
light. You could get up, pause,
Take a
go,
break.
yeah,
I
go get
I
a drink
took
of water.
several
Yeah,
breaks. I'm not like, I'll be honest with you. I
yeah.
took
I did
breaks.
too. I did too. Yeah.
It was a lot. Yeah, I
I mean,
don't know that I don't know how I would have felt seeing this in theater. I really don't know.
yeah. You're right. It could have been worse because I would have been more trapped
Yeah.
watching in a way.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny, like hearing myself talk about it. I'm like saying things about this movie that I say I want in horror movies, right? Like I want a lot of these feelings.
Sure.
But it's interesting. Now, do you know? And I can't think if there was an explanation given.
Mhm.
Probably not in the movie. What the name, the title of this movie is referring to? You
Yeah.
do know.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, it's a song?
As in like Sharon Lois and Bram, Skinamarink Dink, that one.
I think
That's what
so.
this is about.
I thought so, because I thought that was like a kid song. Is it not a kid song?
It is a kid song. It was from
It's like a
the yeah
nursery
from the
rhyme, right?
80s.
Or
There was a show when I was a kid called
right.
Sharon Lois and Bram, the Elephant
Okay.
Show, right? Do you
Okay,
remember
yeah.
that? And
So
they
yeah,
sang that. I
so
don't know if that's where it was originally from, but that's how I know it. And I
yeah,
like
it's like a kid
jokingly
song.
said that's what it was referring to, but I didn't know that actually is what that was.
I mean, I honestly, I guess technically I didn't like look it up or see anything that like definitively said that, but given the themes and everything that we're seeing throughout,
Yeah,
because this movie is filmed, it takes place in 94, 96.
interesting. I would have guessed it was older. It was supposed to be like 80s
Yeah,
or something like that.
it takes place in the 90s, like the mid 90s or
Which
something like
is
that.
yeah, so that would have been relevant. That song would have
I'm
been.
thinking, yeah. So, and I don't know if
Hmm,
like maybe that song had an impact on the creator, and that
hmm,
was where I have no idea, but that's just, I immediately went to the kid song. I was like, oh, this
that's
is what it's
interesting.
named. Because I mean, it takes so many things that are child friendly
Yeah.
and makes them uncomfortable. Like, so why not such a fun and easygoing song, making it like
Hmm.
terrifying
Right. You're probably right. Hmm.
and just associating it, with everything else. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't know. I mean, do we want to jump into spoilers? Because I feel
Yeah,
like
there's so much to say. Yeah.
there, yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, so I will say, did you feel like you got like a theme or like an overall point of the film?
So I guess the first question I have to ask is,
Mhm.
are we supposed to interpret? Is this a movie that you are supposed to interpret, or did I miss the obvious answer?
So that's like a multi-part. Okay, so I don't think it's obvious
Okay.
exactly. Um, I think it takes a very specific mindset, as well as some exposure I've had to other things that are similar to this that have a similar what I feel the message is.
Hmm.
But the overall like message and theme that I got was child abuse and neglect.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
this
and worse, and probably worse than that, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and you know
Right.
what? You know what's really crazy about that is it went that level with only one scene
Yeah.
for me. I think we're talking about the same thing. The scene with the dad and he goes into the daughter's room in the middle of the night. Is
Yes.
that what
Yeah.
we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that lingered because I remember. Okay, because that happens really early, and
Yeah.
that happens. And then right after that is when Kevin, the little boy, falls down the stairs.
Or yeah. Yeah. The dad's on the phone and says Kevin fell
Tells
down
to
the
the
stairs. Yeah.
I'm assuming the mom,
And not. Yeah. I assume. Yeah.
I assume. But yeah, like that's what I felt like. I mean, and there's a lot of things like the this concept of like, and this is getting really deep into like just this is what I got out of this. This is my interpretation of the symbolism in this film. The no doors and the no windows to me is probably, that would be what a child would feel like if they were trapped in a house with a parent they couldn't trust. There's
Hmm.
no way out. There's nobody that can see or hear them or help them. And
Okay.
that feeling of true trap, there's no lights. Everything is dark. All of those things all to me were very like mental states of child abuse.
Yeah.
And I feel like and I mentioned earlier like diving into I was not abused as a child. I feel like I need to say that because I said earlier I was going to dive into some personal things. But my dad and my stepmom did get custody of me when I was very young for some neglect on my mother's side. And so some of these things of like feeling completely alone even when there's probably an adult around, having to kind
Sure.
of take care of yourself. In this case, you've got the older sister that's helping kind of help Kevin take care of things. And when they hear the spooky noises, she's the one that goes and
Yeah.
investigates. And she's having
Yeah.
to be an adult for her very young brother, who's supposed to be the same age as my son. And there's a lot of, but there's so much of that to unpack. Like we couldn't even cover, I don't think all of that in 30
Yeah.
minutes,
Right.
but the theme of that and the way this is presented in the point of view of children, these looking up high from awkward angles, the looking down
Yeah.
low,
Brilliant. Yeah.
brilliantly shot. The blue filter, stunning, very
And
effective.
really unsettling the entire
Very
time. Yeah.
unsettling, very
Yeah.
90s horror as well,
Already.
because
Yep.
the blue filter was a very 90s horror thing.
It was very poltergeist,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then, like those kind of things, like it just took me, like, I'm in my 30s. I am very much afraid of the dark. I sleep with night lights.
Yeah.
I don't, the under the bed thing. I don't have anything over the rails of the side of my bed. So you can always see completely under my bed. Like I have very strange things from my childhood fears that this brought back to me like full circle.
Yeah.
And so it hit me in such a way. And then like, and I'll tell you, like, I just thought that as heavy and sad as it was, I think that it is things that like we don't really talk about in horror in this way. And it was just a very like,
Yeah.
oh, like, wow. Like I walked away from this feeling emotional because it just the things that it had to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and my interpretation was a little bit different. I didn't
Oh,
know
okay.
if we were seeing, basically this was more of a supernatural thing, and
Yes.
something really tragic that happened to these children, and this was wherever they were afterwards.
Almost like purgatory.
or purgatory or wherever,
Yeah.
and they were just forever
Mhm.
trapped
Yep.
in this house. Because also, it seemed to me that there were certain things that were not even like chronologically in order. I mean, right?
Right. Yep.
Because at the beginning of the movie, they're looking for the dad who's not there, but
Yep.
then there's scenes where he's there, and then there's reference to something happening to the mother, and
Yep.
and when they said, did dad go where, mom went?
Yep.
I don't want to talk about that, one of them said.
Yeah,
And so I thought,
the older sister, I think, changes the subject. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I didn't know what happened to her.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the mom died. Maybe
That's
that's the mom.
that's what I thought. But
I
then later
forgot
on in the
about that
movie,
part. Yeah. I
then
was
later
thinking
on,
about the phone call. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, is out of order. And then there was like a scene where both parents were like sitting on the edges of the bed.
That was the most, to me, that's the scariest scene in the whole
That
movie.
was that was that was terrifying.
I was so
Actually, really,
uncomfortable.
really was.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
legitimately.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so that was not really, like I say, in order, I don't think. So and then I thought maybe that something happened to at some point to both the parents, and the kids actually were left alone, like literally in the house, and then I don't know. Or
Yeah.
they witnessed something, and then this was the trauma or the shock of
Yeah.
whatever. There, but see, that's the fact that it's so unclear, like it's
Mhm.
completely left open to interpretation.
Yeah.
It's on what it's interesting that they
Mhm.
did it that way, but also it's sort of, as someone watching movies, sort of frustrating too. Like, again, I don't necessarily want to do the work and try to interpret what you meant. Like, I mean, a little bit,
Yeah.
but like not in the entire movie. We've said
No,
that
yeah.
before.
I know what you're saying. Well, I think the thing is that like that's why films like this work for some people and they don't for others, because
Yeah.
that the reason I got the things I did is because of the way my mind works specifically. Like I looked at it, there's things that I caught or paid attention to that I'm sure other people didn't pay as much attention to, and vice versa. Like there's just things that and I will say this, one of the other things that kind of led me in the mindset of like abuse and neglect is there are two horror video games that are, if you were to take those two video games and put them together, it would make this movie almost.
Hmm. Interesting.
There's definitely some differences there. It's not like a complete ripoff of the video games. And for all we know, they didn't even heard of the video games. It's just coincidence. But the first game is called Anatomy. And it's a game, it's like a pixelated game where you walk around and each room of the house has a recorder, like a tape recorder, and you have to listen to a tape. And as you're going through and you're learning the story of the house, it's not like an action game or anything like that. You don't have to kill anything. You just walk around and learn the story. You realize that the house is actually alive and that every room of the house is a different part of the body, basically. Short version. It's a short little indie game. Maybe if I can remember, I'll link it in the description for this episode.
Sure.
The second one is Among the Sleep, which is a horror game that you play from the point of view of a toddler.
No.
It's terrifying. But the short version of it, spoiler alert if you haven't played Among the Sleep or you're not familiar, it ends up being that we are seeing the world through the eyes of a toddler and this nightmare and these monsters, and the world looks weird because the child is being abused. And at the end of the game, the father finally gets custody and takes the child away from the abusive
That's
mother.
a game. That's a game.
It's a horror game, yes.
Wow.
So, but having the experience and knowing the stories of those games going into this, my brain automatically went there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah, I don't know. My brain did not go there immediately. But
yeah.
now that you're saying it, that makes sense too.
No, I know. Yeah.
But really, it could have. Who knows for sure what the intention, or maybe it felt more like it was like a work of art. Like this was something that you go and you see in a museum, and then you come away with your own interpretation of whatever you're looking at. I feel like
Yeah. No,
that's
I
what this
agree.
movie felt like to me.
Yeah.
Now, the other question we wanted to answer.
Yeah.
So obviously this is Found Footage Fridays, and viewers might be wondering, because there might be viewers watching this saying, I don't believe that to be a found footage horror movie.
Yep.
So I think even you and I are maybe on opposite sides, or we're both sort of wavering on it. So we should probably talk about that. Like,
Yeah.
is or isn't Skinamarink a found footage horror movie? I had already seen some people before. That was one of the few things I had seen about this. I saw somebody say it's not found footage, like angrily on Twitter. That was like probably the only thing I'd seen about this beforehand. So
Oh, okay.
let's dive into it. So you think it has found footage elements? You would say?
Yes, I think there are found footage elements. I think that we talk a lot about what it means to be like a true found footage film, and most found footage movies are not true found footage movies because they're not found footage. We talk about that like all the time. That's one of your things that you look for when we watch these films, and that's not the case with this. This is not something that it's like, oh, these are police tapes or security cameras or whatever, right? Like no one found this, but to me, what it kind of reminded me of sort of is, we talked about when we did our review for He's Watching, we talked about
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
We talked about this though. Because we talked about like the ghost or whatever it is having its own camera. That's what this felt like to me. Like, and I think that
I wondered if you'd go there.
Yeah, because that's what it felt like to me. I do think this was done, if that's the situation, I think this was done better than He's Watching, because it's the only way that it's shot. It's also the cuts of the way that it switches scenes are very abrupt and remind me of camera shutoffs and ons. But I think the biggest thing for me is it's to me, I wouldn't say that this is probably like, I wouldn't constitute this as like full on found footage. I would say that this has a found footage style, that there are definitely things about this that do check boxes under what a found footage film contains. Especially because we are not getting these beautifully orchestrated cinematography shots. We are getting weird blips from the point of view of a child, sometimes not the point of view of a child, but it's like these weird angles, and it's like just can't, like almost like odd camera placements, or like a camera just being set down and left on. And so those were kind of my thoughts on its found footage elements, because you're saying like you saw that people were like saying it wasn't. But when I first started seeing posts about it on socials before it ever had come out in theaters, people were saying that Skinamarink is a great new found footage movie for 2023.
Oh, interesting.
I was seeing the opposite. And so that was because originally that was why I recommended it. We talk about it, because it was like supposed to be a found footage film. And then I started watching it, and I think I messaged you and I was like, I don't know that this counts as found footage.
So I guess it all hinges on, can an unknown entity be filming, people? And if we decide He's Watching that, yes, that is, then you don't have to know who or what is quote unquote filming, the people in this movie.
Or the why.
Yeah, so it's a non sort of traditional thought. I can't really argue with that. I do think there were even shots that were like POV, point of view shots, where it looked like they almost were carrying a camera.
Yeah, because it would pan over,
Well, actually there was one where I feel like they were walking when the kid was walking into like the bedroom at one point. It looked like,
and looking under the bed.
And they had there was like a flashlight that was like moving with the camera, almost as if it was the light from the camera. So there was like that kind of thing. Yeah. So I can't argue against that. It's not obviously a found footage film.
I agree.
But yes, if we say definitively now on Found Footage Fridays that we don't have to know who the cameraman is, and they can be an unknown bystander of whatever origin, then this could be a found footage film. But is there even footage I think that is the question. Or is this just from a being's eyes? Is this footage at all? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is this supposed to be footage, or is this just how it was filmed? I don't know. Again, this whole movie is sort of a big, is it this or is it that? So
Yeah.
that's the whole point of this movie, I think.
Well, and I think to your point, asking these questions to me, and I don't always feel this way because sometimes the more things you have to ask or figure out or think about, it can become, like you said, frustrating as a viewer. You're like, okay, but I think that this has kind of stirred up so many conversations about not just the story elements or whatever, but also like what subgenre does this fall under is kind of a testament to like its ability to get out to so many different people who want to talk about what is this thing, because it kind of like I had posted, I really think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I had posted something about us looking for found footage recommendations or something months ago. And this was one that somebody commented because they had seen it in the festival circuit. And so I was like, I've never even heard of that. And I looked it up. It looked really cool. The trailer definitely alludes to it being found footage. So I was really interested in it, but I couldn't see it yet. And then it didn't come out until theaters until January. And then now it's on Shudder, of course. But I just I went into it expecting found footage. And maybe like you were talking about, when you go into a film with like these things in your head, sometimes it's hard to separate. So if I had never been told that, I probably would not have recommended it for Found Footage Fridays,
It also, has like the grainy aspect of like, it looks like old film, like film from the 90s. So like that's definitely like the look of the movie.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of people who don't watch as much found footage as we do, which is like everybody, pretty much.
We're the experts.
Yeah. Like, the average person who maybe watches horror and has seen like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
Would they distinguish this from most other they wouldn't have other found footage movies necessarily to even say, this isn't that.
That's a good point.
But I'm okay with it, being classified as found footage because they're being sort of liberal with how we define footage and how we define camera person.
Yeah.
I think camera being. So yeah. So I'm okay with that.
So yeah, that's kind of
how we ended up anyways.
Talking about. You're right. That's how we got how we ended up talking about it for Found Footage Fridays. Because I just, oh God, there really is a lot to say about this and in general, because I just think like I started writing my Letterboxd review 2 days ago. I have not finished it yet for this movie. Yeah, because I'm just like, I feel like there's so much to say, and I do Letterboxes, obviously, like no spoilers, but it's like there's just a lot to say. I think I will say this because I don't think I've said this yet. I do think that as much as I appreciated this, as much as I loved this, as high a rating as I gave it, I do not believe there to be any rewatch value. I do not think this is a film that, in 5 years, I'm going to be like, you know what I want to watch tonight? I don't think that's not a situation. I think this is like a one-time experience.
Yeah.
And then once it has passed, you're just like, all right, so I have now seen this film.
there are a few films like that for me. Like,
yeah.
I always said like Requiem for a Dream. That's like you watch that.
One and done.
One and done. I can't think of any. That's the one that I always like name like that, but there are others. And this is definitely in that category. So
yeah,
I'm still glad we covered it. I'm glad that it's it's sort of in the popular conscious right now. Everyone's talking about it, so made sense for us to talk about it too.
And if people are watching it and they're going into it thinking, oh, this is like a really cool found footage film, then maybe that'll turn into them going and looking into more things that are more what we would consider like more traditional found footage or whatever you'd want to call it.
So if you're watching and I'd be curious what other people think. Did you think this was found footage? Do you think this was not found footage? let us know in the comments below.
Yeah. Definitely definitely a lot of room for conversation on that, I think.
Absolutely. In opinion.
And opinions, yes.
I think that's how the producers of this movie, or the writers of this movie, I think that's what they probably want. People talking about it. And
I think it's working.
Analyzing. Yeah.
Definitely working. So, but yeah, that's that's our thoughts on
Skinamarink
Skinamarink.
dinky doo.
Count on Tom to end on a silly note. It's like, damn, this movie was heavy. What? Yeah. So it is streaming on Shudder. So if you have Shudder, you can watch it on Shudder. I'm sure you can probably rent it too if you don't have Shudder, but you should probably have Shudder.
Everyone should have Shudder at this point.
Just get it. It's more than worth it. And yeah, well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this episode of Found Footage Fridays. Have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy your week coming up, and Tom and I will see you next week. Oh, do we want to say what we're talking about?
Yeah, we know what next week is. So
yeah, go ahead. What are we talking about
next week? We're talking about a classic found footage film, the opposite. We're going to talk about Grave Encounters, because it's a miracle that we have not. We've not done it yet or tackled it on the show. So next week, Grave Encounters. See you then.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys then.
Bye.